In the spring of 1927, the Mississippi River did something no army of engineers had planned for. It swallowed the middle of a nation. An area the size of New England went underwater. 27,000 square miles, across 7 states, some of it 30 feet deep. More than 500,000 people lost their homes. And part of that flood was not an accident of nature. It was a decision. For decades, the men who controlled the river had bet everything on one idea. Levees only. No spillways, no outlets, no relief. Just higher and higher walls of earth, holding the greatest river on the continent in a single narrow channel. Through the winter of 1926, it rained as it had never rained before. By spring, the river was carrying 3 million cubic feet of water every second. The levees began to groan. Crews worked day and night, stacking sandbags higher, watching the brown water climb toward the top. Everyone knew that if a levee gave way, whole counties would drown in minutes. The only question was which levee, and whose land lay behind it. On the 21st of April, near Greenville, Mississippi, the levee at Mound's Landing exploded outward. A wall of water 3/4 of a mile wide poured through the gap, with the force of a waterfall 10 times larger than Niagara. The delta went under. Towns vanished. People climbed onto rooftops and into trees and waited, sometimes for days, for a boat that might not come. In Greenville, the only dry ground left was the crown of the broken levee itself. Thousands of refugees crowded onto it, with their animals and whatever they could carry. And there, on that thin strip of mud, the flood revealed something about who mattered and who did not. The men who ran the delta, the great planters, made a decision. The black families in the camps would not be evacuated. If they were shipped north to safety, the planters feared, they might never come back to work the cotton. So they were kept on the levee. Held there, under guard, they were put to work, filling sandbags, unloading relief boats, hauling supplies, often for no pay at all. 300 miles downriver, the city of New Orleans watched the water rise and began to panic. The city was the financial heart of the South. If it flooded, its banks and its port could be ruined, and everyone who lent them money knew it. So the men who ran New Orleans, its bankers and its brokers, met behind closed doors and settled on a plan. They would blow a hole in the levee below the city. They would drain the river's pressure onto someone else's land and save their own. The land they chose lay in St. Bernard and Plaquemines parishes. Poor country, trappers and fishermen, people with little money and less influence. On the 29th of April, engineers packed the Carnarvon levee with dynamite. Over the days that followed, they set off nearly 40 tons of it. The river burst through the man-made gap and swept across the marsh parishes, drowning homes, trapping lines, and villages that had stood for generations. The families who lived there were promised one thing in exchange: full payment for everything the flood destroyed. But here, the archive says otherwise. Of the millions of dollars in claims that were filed, only a small fraction was ever paid. And there was a crueler detail. Within weeks, engineers realized the dynamiting had never been necessary at all. Crevasses upriver had already relieved the pressure. New Orleans was never going to flood. The parishes below it had been drowned for nothing. Across the flooded South, more than 600,000 refugees now lived in camps run by the Red Cross. For white families, the camps were a refuge. For black families, in much of the Delta, they became something closer to a prison. They needed a pass to leave. They were made to work for their rations. Some who refused were beaten. It was forced labor, in all but name. A commission of black leaders was sent to investigate, and what they found was damning. Peonage, violence, and theft of relief supplies. Their report was handed to Herbert Hoover, the man in charge of the entire relief effort. He buried it, until after the next election was safely won, because Hoover understood what the flood really was. Not only a disaster, but an opportunity. The newsreels made him the hero who tamed the great river. 18 months later, he was President of the United States. The official death toll was set at around 500. Historians who have studied the record believe the true number, uncounted and unclaimed, was many times higher. And the flood changed the country. Hundreds of thousands of black families who had been held on those levees left the South for good. The government finally took control of the river and swore it would never again have to choose one city over another. That promise was carved into law, but the parishes below New Orleans remembered the truth. That in the worst flood in American history, part of the water did not come from the sky. It was aimed at them.